Welcome to an all-new episode of Motor Driven, and I really am looking forward to powering into this week's episode. Now, last week we chatted to Tasman Pepper, so I thought why not continue the Powerful Woman in Motoring theme. Last year I went to the McLaren Technology Centre, and while I was there I had the unbelievable privilege of spending time chatting to Amanda McLaren. What a great honour to have Amanda McLaren showing me around her workspace. This is work.
This is work.
Shame.
This is where I come
Shame.
most days of the week to actually work. And yes, it is a shame, you know. What a chore having to come into such a beautiful building with such a beautiful vista out there, and then to look at the cars around us.
You know what amazes me is, like, I'm used to, when you're producing cars, it's very much in an industrial space. But everything about this facility is actually just mind-blowing. The attention to detail, the design, you know, every shape is there to serve a purpose, much like the designing of the cars.
Well, it's absolutely right. Form equals function. And that's very true about this building as well. It was designed and engineered to showcase McLaren's expertise in those two things. But for example, the beautiful lake out here, it is wonderful to look at, but it serves a purpose. It is the cooling system for our wind tunnel.
Amanda, this must be the most difficult interview I've ever done, because I really am trying to pay attention to you and listen, but you can't help but just be drawn to memories, emotions. I mean, these are special cars.
Well, they are the real deal. They're the cars that Ayrton Senna raced in 1988, MP44 here, still regarded as the most successful car in the history of the sport. Between them, Alan and Ayrton won 15 of the 16
Yeah,
races.
I mean, that was 88, wasn't it?
He's absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But I can just imagine the emotion that is there for people to get up close with those cars that their heroes drove. You know, it's.
Well,
I'm getting goosebumps.
Goosebumps.
It's overwhelming, actually.
We've had gentlemen in tears touching the car that their hero drove, holding that same wheel as James Hunt or Ayrton Senna or Kimi Räikkönen, and it's really quite something just to be a part of that and remember that, yes, these are actually the genuine cars.
For them to have you here telling that story is also unbelievable. It's a masterstroke, because that tie back to heritage, to where it all started, when your dad, you know, had an idea to go racing, to tinker around, and yeah, we have it. I mean, we're walking past the first cars they won the championship with. It's just so many stories. It's unbelievable.
What my father started still continues today. One of only two Formula One teams that were racing in the 60s. That Red Italian won the other one.
Yeah, we won't talk about that.
We don't mention that name in here. But my father, of course, was always planning to produce road cars as the next big thing. So what automotive are doing is fulfilling that vision and dream that he had.
But it must be incredible for you to see that. You know, were your dad around today, I think he'd be really proud, because that engineering and design ethos is still at the forefront of everything McLaren does.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be here today, fantastic though the building is, amazing what the three companies within the McLaren Group are doing, if I didn't think my father would be proud. His design and engineering philosophy created fast cars, but based on being very, very light. And that's exactly the same, what we call the McLaren DNA, that runs through everything we do as a company today. So he would be genuinely delighted, not only that his name is still out there at the forefront, but also the way we are doing what it is we're doing.
Hanging on to that heritage is critical, because that's a unique story. That's what people buy into. But having you involved in that, we talk women in motoring and women in motorsport, you know, it's almost like people forget how involved women were in the beginning. I mean, think of your mom in those days. You know, she wasn't just the wife.
Well, absolutely. I mean, women back, especially sort of through the 60s when my mother was so involved, she and Dad shared the driving from home to all of the European circuits. She made sure that everything was packed, and when they got there, all the team members had what they needed. And then once they started testing and racing, who did all the lap scoring and all the timekeeping? The women. My mother was it is said, one of the best at basically following 4 or 5 cars with all the stopwatches and keeping all the records.
Isn't there a story that in one of the races the timekeeping was down and they actually went to her?
They did. They did.
She also founded an organisation.
My mother was instrumental in founding a club called the Women's Motor Racing Associates Club, or the Doghouse for short. And that was initially set up really as a benevolent society because, sadly, racing was so dangerous. So many of the husbands and boyfriends were killed driving. So my mother was an initial founding member and went on to become chair of it. And I am now patron of that association, which thankfully has moved away from needing to be a benevolent fund to being a club for women in motorsport, because today we have far more women drivers, women involved in design and engineering, and moving forward, I think, you know, at some point the scales will balance out.
You talk about the dangers of motorsport. I mean, this was like Apollo missions. I mean, at the same time, there was no easy way to test things. You had ideas. Let's try this. If it doesn't work, there's some serious risk. There was no simulation for it. You tested it by strapping yourself in, having a go. And I think we don't want to ever forget that, because I think that is what makes the commitment and the passion of someone like your dad, living his dream to the full. I know there was such a beautiful story about it's not how long you live for, but it's the value of what you put in your time, and that really sums him up.
Well, absolutely. Life is measured in achievement, not in years alone, which really summed up. He wrote that as an epitaph for his teammate who had been killed, Timmy Mayer, and that became his own epitaph. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, some of the features on this car, for example, the very high wings. An aeroplane wing, upside down, it's going to create downforce. But how did they actually measure the downforce created by this? They put it in the back of a minivan and actually put bathroom scales underneath the down struts.
You're kidding.
And the mechanics sat in the back watching the bathroom scales as it went up and down the motorway. Now, we have moved on a little since those days, but the
super
way
creative.
Well, absolutely. And the way we do things today, yes, we have new technologies and ways of doing it, but that attention to detail has not changed. So, for example, over the bodywork of this car, where the rivets on the bodywork, you see they're capped and painted over, so you get smooth, clean airflow over that body. Over the wings, where you just want to create a little more turbulence to give you downforce and grip, the rivets are left open. This car has actually got the nickname the Thursday car because it only ever appeared in public once, and that was for the practice for the Monaco Grand Prix in 1969. And at the end of the practice, the governing body of Formula One had banned the high front wings, so we had to take it off.
No way.
So she's called the Thursday car for that reason. It
makes you realise just how clever they were in terms of finding a solution for a problem. You were chatting to me earlier about the nose design, and that's a unique feature they've carried through.
Well, that's right. I mean, it came about, my father was testing a car that didn't have the nostrils in the nose. And they'd gone into the pits and refueled the car. And the fuel filler cap had not clicked down properly. So as my father drove out of the pits, it was bumping. And he thought, well, as I go faster, the air pressure over the nose of the car will click that down.
Didn't happen.
But it didn't. It bumped. The faster he went, the more. And my father understood aerodynamics, and he drove back into the pits, got out of the car, and found a pair of tin snips or tin shears and cut a big jagged hole in the nose of the car. And apparently some of the mechanics thought that, you know, he'd really lost the plot at that point and kind of, Bruce, what are you doing? And he's like, no, it's okay. He went out, did some more laps, and then came back in. And the mechanic doing the timing said, wow, that's incredible. How much more quickly you're going. Why did you come in? And Bruce said, I can no longer see where I'm going because all this hot air was just coming straight at him. So, as you can see on this car, that they actually sort of channeled the car around the sides. But that's a feature that is so common in today's
It's all aerodynamics.
Cars. It's all about aerodynamics and just airflow through and over the car.
See, pioneering thought.
Absolutely, and that's very much Dad. You know, he was very much an innovator, but he was willing to embrace new materials as well. Bristol McLaren Motor Racing were the first racing company to use a composite material which had come from the aerospace industry called malite, and that was about making the cars more rigid
And lighter.
and make them lighter too. And of course, moving forward to 1980, McLaren International were the first company to use carbon fibre for the chassis of their car. So lots of similarities all the way through the history of McLaren.
It's a different era now. You know, your dad was driving, managing, engineering, fixing, coming up with ideas. You know, now there's a team of people that do it, and the driver is just the driver. It's never going to happen again.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, Dad was the youngest Grand Prix winner for over 40 years, winner at Le Mans, also running the team, designing and building the cars. Tell me anybody else who's achieved all that. So yes, he was jack of all trades, but he was absolutely master of them as well. We are the best in the world at so many things, following those same principles that my father created.
I guess just briefly, we worked very hard. Getting beaten last year was about the best thing that could have happened to us in a way, because it got just everyone we had working as hard as they could go, and I guess this is the result.
50 years back, actually, if you think GT, you got to drive the GT back
Well,
at, I think, 2015 it was at Revival.
At the Goodwood Revival.
Yeah.
So
Scary.
it's probably the most frightening thing I've ever done in my life. I was absolutely delighted when I received the email asking me to drive it. And there was this period of elation, and it wasn't until I actually saw the car, and then I got in the car. And the seat had been moved from the original position where my father had it, quite a way back.
No way
And
you
it was
can reach the
fixed.
pedals.
So the pedals are about a foot away from where my feet are. Managed to find some pillows and some cushions. And now I'm
Talk
on
about-
the
talk
edge
about
of the seat
engineering.
with it all wedged behind me. I could now reach the pedals. Now there were two problems. The windscreen is right here and my nose is almost pressed up against it. And the steering wheel is right here. And now I'm trying to press the clutch in. And
Legs
I'm
like
pressing
this.
as hard as I can, and I can only press it in halfway. How people like my father and Denny Holm drove these cars in a race for the length of time and at the speeds they did, because that M6 GT road car was basically an M6 Can-Am car with a roof made road legal. First time I'm actually going to start this car up and pull away.
And
He's on
everyone's
the
watching.
dummy grid with everybody watching. The story had gone around the paddock at Goodwood that Bruce McLaren's car is here, so people had come to see it, and then, oh, Bruce McLaren's daughter's driving it, oh, let's go and have a look. And it took every ounce of willpower I had not to get out of that car and say, I can't do it. Subsequently, I'm so glad I did. It's actually the first McLaren car I ever drove.
Wow.
Which was really very significant, and probably one of the greatest moments of my life, with such mixed emotions.
Well, you're on the circuit where your dad passed away.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's, yeah, wow.
Really quite something, a very special moment, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite emotional just thinking about what you would have gone through on that. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. And now they're bringing out a GT.
So many design features on that.
That
are so
photograph you
similar.
showed me is it's nuts. I mean, that rear three-quarter, that flank shot and the
same.
glass toe,
It's the same. You know, the way you design a car that's going to pierce the air and be very quick doesn't change. And you know, the rear haunch of Dad's car, the rear haunch of our GT today, it's almost the same.
Amanda, we could literally keep talking all day because I just find it so interesting. But thank you for your time. I mean, this has been it's an unbelievable experience and treat. And just, you know, you feel the emotion just sitting and talking to you. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
I think every racing driver likes the opportunity now and then to be able to come right from the back of the field. It's a great way. You just forget about anything going wrong with the car and just stand on it. And I must say I enjoyed it for a long time.